to thank, there's so many of you who came up to me and you shared the names of your family members or people that you knew that had survived domestic violence. And I really appreciate that, to carry on the theme that Linda just talked about, the fact that we do have to see our students as human and we have to see ourselves as human. And I also wanted to remind you, because there's always something else to remind you of, that tomorrow is National Coming Out Day. So please do feel free to also think about that, especially as you walk through the amazing Harvey Milk terminal. I can't even tell you, I didn't expect it, and when I got off the airplane and to see that, and to see it in this context of institutions where we often don't see ourselves, it was pretty special. And that really is the theme we're going to leave you on with our keynote speaker. It's really my honor to introduce our closing keynote speaker. He's proudly one of our own from our system, and he's proudly one of our own straight from Pomona, California. Yeah, right on. He's the president of Cosumnes River College, and I want to get this whole name right, he is the founder of the African American Male Network and Development Incorporated, but you all know it as A2MEND. Dr. Edward Bush. I know many of you have had the good fortune of working with Dr. Bush or attending meetings or conferences where he's presenting or contributing his expertise, which is over 20 years of experience in leading innovations in California community colleges. And not only has his leadership been instrumental in helping CRC close achievement gaps and equitize learning, but he brings that same spirit and leadership to A2MEND, which, if you are not familiar with the work of A2MEND, is a nonprofit organization that is comprised of African American male administrators who utilize their scholarly and professional expertise to foster institutional change within the community college system. Dr. Bush is a highly published scholar. He has an amazing framework he's helped develop around African American male theory. I know some of you attended that amazing session right before here. It was really great. We got a keynote before you guys got a keynote, so you missed out. And I think what you'll witness in his talk today, he's going to help us at once confront and then embrace the first law of improvement, which is every system is perfectly designed to achieve the results it gets. So what are we going to do about our system? As I've come to understand from my own experiences and interactions with Dr. Bush, he's going to make the case for the urgent dismantling of institutional racism and asymmetrical economics underpinnings that undergird our system in community colleges. But he's going to do it with grace and wisdom. It's born of his fundamental approach. Well, here's what he knows. Our ability to make change is intrinsically tied to the mindset we cultivate as an institution or as a system. He knows that to ask us to do something drastically different than we've done before, it means that we have to confront our own fears and our unacknowledged lack of knowledge or implicit biases. So one of the things he does at his college is he has a fall convocation and a spring convocation, and he comes out and he has a theme, and one of the themes, because I watch them, he, one time, to get at this idea of how do you change something, you have to confront your own fears. So, this apparently, fear of heights, it was one of his fears, and he wanted to, and I think he's going to invite us, along with his own institution, to make this jump, right? To really confront what we need to do to change our system. And another nod to you, Dr. Bush, because this is the other thing he does. Every fall and every spring, it's always going to be something, right? So I'm going to say right here and now, because he tells them it's always the greatest convocation speech ever. So here we go. This is the greatest the greatest closing keynote of Strengthening Student Success Conference is going to happen right here and now with Dr. Ed Bush.
Thank you. What an awesome introduction. That picture is actually traumatic, so I'm glad that we took it down. I really don't like to be reminded much of that experience, but I said at least I'm going to get a good convocation speech out of it, and I did. Thank you all for hanging in there. I know that this is the last closing, so give yourselves a round of applause for. And I pray that I will make it somewhat worthwhile, and that it will be time well spent. How many were in the workshop that just happened? It was really good energy. It was funny. I was going back and forth with Dr. Donna Cooper. I was like, I didn't say it quite this way, but in my mind, I was like, you sure you want me to do a workshop before my keynote? Then they had a great idea where I was supposed to talk very minimally. I was just going to answer. And they laughing, those who were in the workshop. It probably would have been easier if we just did the workshop right here and would have got the keynote out of the way. But the energy in the room was great, and I can't help it. And we started, and I couldn't help being drawn to the energy and engage the folks there and honor their time. And in my hope is that I will be able to likewise draw from your energy, and that I would get a case of the can't help it as well, that I will pour out in a way that's even greater than I would have anticipated in preparation. One of the things that I want to do that's somewhat off script, particularly as in many ways this presentation, this talk, this keynote may challenge you, may challenge us, and definitely may challenge the system, but I do want to make what I think is an incredibly important distinction that often gets overlooked when we talk about disruptive work and change work, is that often I think we fail to fundamentally acknowledge all of the monumental efforts, well-intentioned efforts that have transpired at our institutions for years. And so I don't want to leave this podium without explicitly acknowledging all of your hard work and effort. You all have done an amazing job within your institutions. You work hard, you work diligently to make sure that the students that come through your doors have the very best experience as possible. So I want you to know that I see you. And if no one has told you thank you lately or have expressed their gratitude for that work and effort, I want to acknowledge and show my gratitude to you right now. Please give yourselves a round of applause. For your hard work and your efforts. And I would like to tell you, because I also get the sense, because we definitely experienced it at my institution, and they gave it a name, and I think it's a name that others use around this initiative fatigue, right? Our workload creep. If you're my union representative, that's what he reminds me of all the time. Dr. Bush, what about the workload creep? And I said, yeah, I got you. Right, let's talk about that next week, right? In the meantime, we got some work to do, and I would like to be able to suggest to you that the intensity of the work is going to go away. But I think you already know. that is not going to happen. Simply, we are not in that period of time in our system. That just like in other social movements and situations, sometimes a certain generation, a certain group of people are tasked to take on some additional burdens that perhaps a previous generation of people did not have to do. Right now, we are at a period of time that I fundamentally believe that the window is open for substantive change within our system that is going to require us to work even harder. That this is going to be our burden and our responsibility for occupying this particular space and time in our system that is going to require us to do something different than maybe the person who held the position before you. That I fundamentally going to have to approach my work different than the president at CRC that came before me and that person, because the times that we are living in and operating in is fundamentally different, so it requires a different type of work. So what I want you to do right now, whether it's in your head, whether it's in your spirit, or whether you do it physically, I need you to make a shift. I'm going to need you to kind of gird up a little bit more. Like if you thought you were already armored up, then you need to get a little bit more armor. If you thought you already had a lot of energy, I need you to get a little bit more energy. If you had some outrage based on the outcomes and the injustice, I need to get you to get a little bit more indignant. Thought I had somebody with me. Appreciate that. I'm working hard up here, and y'all looking like this is the last day of the closing or something. I just got here. You just wrap your mind and your spirit around the idea that you are the critical force. And I'm not speaking collectively right now, I'm talking to you, the individual. When I played high school basketball, there was a term when we had to play lockdown defense. Right, we used to say this thing, as a captain, I would say that like, don't you be the one. I would say, don't you be the one, meaning if you're denying, I know, I'm sorry, using sports analogy just works so well and so easy for me to do. Is that don't let your man touch the ball. Don't be the one to let your man touch the ball. We play defense collectively, but sometimes you have to make a decision in yourself that you're going to be the one to make the difference. Yes, other folks in your department, it's other folks in your division. You're not alone, but at some point you have to know that you have to be the one to dig in and make sure your man don't touch the ball. You got to dig in and make sure that this student is not going to fail on my watch. You got to make the decision that this student is going to understand this concept today. I don't care what's going to happen in her classroom next. I don't care what background or what lack of educational preparation that they had, but because I know that I'm the one that can make a critical difference in this student's life, that I'm going to close the gap myself. That I'm not going to depend on a system. That I'm not going to look to get permission from my dean or my vice president. Now, I'm not going to wait for the budget process or program review or the next accreditation cycle. That today, right now, I'm going to take ownership of my space. I'm going to take ownership of my space. What space do you occupy at the institution that could be transformed because you decide to make it different? I know what I'm going to say next. I'm pausing on purpose. It's called, theatrical effect. We often give up our own power and our own authority because we're looking for someone else or something else to happen before we just do. And before we just be. Can you imagine if we all decided to just control our own space in which we have influence, and how transformational that would be to the entire institution, or transformational for the students, or the faculty, or the other staff, or administrators to occupy that space with us? Window that is, I'm saying that you have to do more. I'm saying every day I wake up, I'm saying I have to do more. There's another innovation, there's another idea, there's another piece of work. There's another professional development because then you don't know what that thing is that is going to be the tipping point to make all the difference in the world, so you have to keep pushing. And if you don't hear anything from the rest of my presentation, because we still are at the title slide, and that's scary. That's what happened when you just be thinking about coming from the dome. Like, I don't know why I do a PowerPoint. Like, I really don't. It makes no sense in the world, because I know I'm going to look at you. I know you're going to look at me. I'm going to feel you. You're going to feel me. And I'm just going to go with that. But what I'm feeling from you right now, just continue to push. Continue to push. I know you're dealing with the drama at your institution. I know there's some folks you work with that you absolutely just don't like. I know you might be sitting next to them right now, so just look towards me. And you just have to sit with them because they're from the same school and you going through. Please hope they didn't save me a spot. I hope they didn't save me a spot at the table. Hope they didn't. I know I'm telling the truth. I'm just serious. Despite those challenges, despite who you're present, despite who you do the work. Despite if you haven't read all the books on equity, do the work. And this is a side note, this is for free, and this is just where I'm at. And it's going to sound crazy. It really is. So I'm trying to think of how I can make it sound less crazy. I'm really tired of the equity talk. In academia right now, we have this, what I call sanitized academic discourse around equity that seeks safety. Shoot. Homeboy, what's wrong with that? I'm glad you asked. Because inherently, real equity work is not safe, it's not sanitized. It's great to have other people on my team that is rooted in academic understanding around equity.
But I really would prefer someone who maybe read one book, who's just down to do work, who are in their bones, they're just activists and agitators, right? No, we could catch up on the reading, but it's hard to teach someone to have courage. If I could get you, if you show up mad, I'm good. Like you show up just mad and say, hey, something has to change. You don't need to reference 5 scholars. Just be willing to come in and agitate, to shake some stuff up. But we want to have conversations around equity. To me, my orientation of equity comes with some sacrifice. It comes with it looks like fire hoses and police dogs. And it comes out of it comes out of a struggle. And I have folks talking about me like, we're doing this equity work and the faculty don't like me. Or people are pushing back, or I feel like my job is in jeopardy. I'm like, no freaking duh. Like, to be about equity work is fundamentally me putting my job on the line every day. Because it's about disrupting something that is accepted as a norm or a present condition. It's about redistributing power. We talk about equity, but we don't talk about redistributing power or taking hands out of those who possess the power. So my patience for the Q equity talk, for me, it's important. I've led those. I've done that. It's critical. But give me someone who's willing to go on the march in the face of dogs lining the street, who puts students ahead of their tenure, ahead of their job, who's willing to stand up and do the right thing when it's unpopular. Tell the truth before the truth is accepted as truth. Call things out. Don't care about managing the comfort levels of others in the face of inequities. We care more about those who perpetuate inequities than those who've been victimized by it. Oh, how you feeling? Don't cry. I know this is hard. And someone just expressed how much they've been damaged and hurt by inequitable structures and institutions, and we run towards the person who cries when they hear the story as opposed to the person who's telling the story. I digress. The paradox of dismantling a perfectly designed system really has come out of what has been a source of frustration as we attempt to do the work to create more equitable outcomes, particularly for students of color and low-income students. I call it a pet peeve of mine, but it's really stronger than that. Is often we expend a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort solving issues that are symptoms as opposed to addressing issues that are at the core. And one of the things that I think that we have to always revisit, that should always be front and center, that should always set the context to the conversations that we have around inequities, is to go back to the source as it relates to the California community colleges specifically, but also higher educational structure within the state of California in particular. Look at your neighbor and say the source. I know this is taking you to Sunday. I'm just going to wake you up. Look at your other neighbor and say, the source. The source. We want to go to the source. We don't want to chase the symptoms anymore. And we have spent over decades of history in higher education and community college, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources trying to solve symptoms without a diagnosis of where the disease is actually coming from. So what I want to do is call out the disease, and it just so happened that Clark Kerr face is up right now. So let's revisit quickly the source of the creation. Community college existed before, but our present understanding of the three-tier structure of the California higher education system, and with the chief architect of the California master plan that I refer to as the MASA plan. Some of you may get the Ebonics switch of that. If not, ask a black neighbor. If you don't have a black neighbor, quickly move, because it's likely it's not going to be my last cultural reference that you may or may not understand, but look for the context clues, and you may get it. The California Master Plan. And Clark Kerr was president of UC Berkeley and also then became the president of the University of California. How many of you know a little bit about Clark Kerr? Show your hands. How many of you knew what his academic discipline was? What was he? No. He was, it could be out of that. He was an economist. That's critical. We're going to come back to that. He was an economist. Right? So the California Master Plan, or the Plan for Higher Education, at the very beginning was connected to something very critical, which it was the economy, or the future economy for the state of California, and what was the workforce needs, or the emerging workforce needs of the state. So we began to have this structure in place. And the image that I gave you was 1960 Time magazine cover. How hard is it for an educator to make the cover of Time magazine? I don't think that's going to be likely for me. So it's really hard to make the cover of Time magazine. That means that something he did, this master plan, was something that was revered, that was of interest, not only in the state of California, but drew attention around the world, right? And so the tenets, and you all know, you are familiar with the master plan and how it created the three segments of higher education, right? I won't say created, but defined, or better defined, the three segments of higher education, right? I'm going to pick out a piece of this. The first bullet says that some form of higher education ought to be available to all, regardless of their economic means, and that academic progress should be limited only by individual proficiency. And you could read the rest. A couple of problematic statements, but we're not going to focus on that yet. But in essence, we could agree that that is a pretty altruistic goal, this idea that everyone in the state of California should have access to higher education, like regardless of the amount of money that you make, right? Regardless of where you come from, this idea that all should have the ability to benefit and take advantage of higher education. We all believe in that notion, right? And then that scripture is important to note and pick up a context clue that we're going to hit a little bit later, is that this was in response to, the master plan was in response to something, right? It was in response to two things, the future economic outlook of the state of California, but also this population increase. And not only a population increase, but you begin to see a trend of the browning and blackening, right, of the state of California, which is significant in this conversation. Are you with me? Okay? And so we see, in what we know now is the stratification within the tier system of the UC and the responsibility of serving roughly 12%, 33% for the CSU, and then open access for the community college. Have you ever stopped, or how many of you know, like, why those percentages? Like, did they just reach in the hat and say 12.5? That seemed rather random, right? Like, why? Good number? Was it based on the number of folks in the population? And so they did the math and said, well, we only UC, we only could do 10,000 students, and 10,000 students is, nah. This was based on what the economic projections of the workforce needs were for the state, based on each type of education that would be produced for each of these systems. So approximately 12% of California, as you move in the future, will need professionals. We need doctors, all the things in which is produced at the UC. So the structure of this was based, it's not arbitrary numbers, it was based on the economic outlook for the state of projections. Let me go back. Something I want to point out. No, it's coming up. My bad. This is a recent 2018 in executive summary of the research office of the governor's, California governor's office, looking at a review of the master plan. And I'm not in the habit of reading slides, but I will read this. While the mythic stature of the master plan is well deserved in many respects, the reality of its creation was much less bold and idealistic. Look at your number again and say the source. Y'all was weak on that. We're going to try it again. According to the literature surrounding it, the master plan, yes, I didn't even have to tell you, was a what? What's the next word? A what? A what? No, one more time. A what? A defensive response to a set of challenges that threatened to upend California higher education. What was the threat? It's a question that should jump out to you. What were they responding to? Should be another question that jumps at you. Rather than establishing truly universal access, which we thought the intent was when we looked at the previous slide, was to do what? Open up access to what? To everyone and to all, but we're seeing a little different turn of that. We say rather than establishing truly universal access to higher education, it sought to provide and limit. This is the state governor's office executive summary. It's not Ed Bush executive summary. It's not the Marxist opinion of California Community College system. It says sought to provide and limit college and university education to those with the capacity and willingness to profit by college instruction, incur own words. He said the master plan, and this is a word that trips me out, was a desperate the chief architect, the chief designer of the plan that we are currently operating in today. What's today? October 10th, 2019. Operating today, saying what he created was desperate. Attempt to prepare for the tidal wave of students, to escape state legislative domination and to contain escalating warfare against the separate segments. So in essence, what Clark Kerr was attempting to do, given the tidal wave of students that were coming that were increasingly students of color, he wanted to protect the elite status and standing of the UC system, primarily, by making sure that black and brown students and poor students who feel like they are entitled to education would not bombard the UC demanding education. In his opinion, if they do that, then the status of the University of California would be demeaned. So let me set up another structure, another system to prevent that from happening. Plans and systems matter. They wouldn't last this long if it was irrelevant. The thing that gets me is that we are all aware of this. I haven't given you any new information, maybe some additional nuance to it that you may or may not have known, but we have been fundamentally okay living in a structure that was a desperate attempt to exclude black and brown students for higher education. And the status and economic potential that comes out of receiving those degrees of the 12.5%. And we operate under that same plan today, and we can't figure out why our students are struggling to get out. The system is producing the exact results that it was designed to achieve. And so we putting energy, resources, and efforts fighting the thing that the system is producing. And I ask you, how much time, energy, and effort have we put in attacking the system? And the implications of the system being sustained plays out in real ways. And you all seen this, you know, right? UCs get more money, right? CSUs get more money, than UCs get more money than CSUs. CSUs get more money than community colleges, right? You know this. I don't have to preach this to you. When we look at the racial makeup, right, of who community colleges are serving, do we think it's coincidental that community college serves more low income and more students of color but receive less funding? Is that not a product of a structure that try to keep black and brown students out? Is that not the source of an issue? We argue over a funding formula that actually gives us no more money. It just moves stuff around. And we say it's radical, even call it revolutionary. But we're still operating out of the same basket. Revolutionary would be go to UC and like, give me my take a drink of water. You can finish. Right? Give me our money. How is it that students who are more wealthy and quote unquote, we would say more prepared, get a greater state investment? But what I need you to think about is even more profound. When we look at our student outcomes and look at equity gaps, it's not an equity gaps in outcomes, it's an equity gap in funding and state investment. So the more money that the state put into a student, the better they do, no duh. The less money they put in a student, the worse they would do. And we see this as a pipeline issue because black and brown students and low-income students attend K through 12 systems that have what? And that's a pivotal shift because we blame often our students for their lack of achievement and don't go back to the source. So I challenge the researchers in the room that anytime you look at data that shows disparities in achievement, you better give some context. Give this context that drives people to look at the disease, the source, as opposed to just analyzing the symptoms. If we just continue to highlight the symptoms, researchers, we are committing educational malpractice. Because you cannot give a prescription without knowing the disease. And people take your information and they're writing prescriptions without focusing on the source. And this is just an interesting dynamic to me. And it's around K-12, but we need to prepare this as well. And simply what this side is saying, and it really kind of buttress what I'm saying about the focus on the students. Because often we say just improve student outcomes. And if we improve student outcomes, then students are going to do better in this system. And I will use a cuss word on this, and that's bullshit. But that's counter to how we work. We all work hard. I work really hard around improving student success. I think we still do it, and I don't have time to unpack it. That's still work we have to do and work really hard to do it. But because the system is stratified and structured to keep certain people out, when those people perform better, the bar just raises. Because it's still formula driven. No matter what, it's still going to be the top 12%. It's still going to be the top 33%. And so that line is going to continue to do what? Move. Because it's not increasing capacity. So this slide is saying that there's thousands of more students prepared to go to CSU and UC that are not getting in because those systems are not growing capacity because they were never meant to. Because the economic structure has not changed. And it's difficult to convince someone with a PhD to dig a ditch than it is that someone that's flunked out of high school because they believe it's their fault and they're supposed to dig a ditch. So the higher education stratifies and sorts that, because if you take the blame for your own conditions, even though you were set up to fail for the beginning, you internalize that, believe you are the failure, therefore you don't deserve the same entitlements. I got to get this. This is a system that we're working in. And so now, given all the great efforts that's happened in community colleges, guess what? We're going to prepare more students to do what? To transfer. It's happening already. The data we're starting to see at my institution is trending tremendous, unprecedented increases in student success. The question is going to be at some point for all of us, it's going to be what? Where do they go? Where do they go? And we have a responsibility around their future success. I'm not saying we abandon the idea and the innovation and the work for them to get better, but what I'm saying is that we can't put all our efforts in that basket. That we have to simultaneously challenge the system, the very notion. Question. How much time? 5 minutes? How much? 21? Oh, no, I can't do that. I got a bus. I got a train. Okay. No, 21. No, then that's not going to work. Okay. This is a critical question. Someone read that out loud. How about we all read it together? Go ahead, everybody, so we're here. What I think is the critical question? What y'all think? Well, yeah, then that's the next slide. It's only if we break it. I said, don't jump ahead of my presentation. Just look at the face value of the question. Is that, can we? And it's rhetorical, but it's not. Because I would say, while I think the logical response, based on the conversation we had and perhaps information that you already knew, your answer would probably be no. But by behavior and observation, I would say that we have collectively decided yes. I would say that we collectively decided yes. And not only have we collectively decided yes, we have invested significant time to create workarounds to accommodate the structure. What's workarounds? No, it's all the special programs, right? EOPS, don't, look, because I saw what happened to somebody else. Nobody say that I'm saying to get rid of EOPS or collapse categorical programs. I'm saying it's a workaround, right? Stuff I created, a men charters, is a workaround. Puente is a workaround. All those things are workaround because it's an acknowledgement, it's needed, and it's important because it's a fundamental recognition that the system is not going to work for everyone. So how can we create something within the system to be a safety net to ensure that everyone don't fall through? But in its creation is an acknowledgement. Like, if we all are sending folks we care about into a system that we know is broken, and that don't keep us up, and we just say, well, maybe if I could just say 30. Because that's the cap for the English course. Maybe if I could say 700, because that's how much we funded for EOP&S. Yeah, it's better to say 30 and 700 for those students that actually get served by those programs. But to work and operate in a system that we know is fundamentally broken and flawed from its inception and continue to support it in the way we do, it's unconscionable. Like, shouldn't we have a system? Let's just think about it. It's basic. Like, shouldn't we have a system and structure designed to work for all students? Like, fundamentally, don't our children, our communities, like, aren't they entitled to that? Don't they at least deserve that not to go to a system that is already rigged? And if we don't do that, at least tell the truth. I make this distinction. I said there's a difference between reality and truth. Like, we have to operate sometimes in a certain type of way because that's real. And we have to do it. But just because we have to do it don't mean that's what we should do it, even though we agree that we're going to do it that way. I know that was confusing as hell. I couldn't think of a better way to do it, right? So you can continue to have your jobs. We can continue to work and support the system because we can say that we don't know any better way to do it. And we don't know of an alternative, so we just accept it and do it. But you could do that still understanding the truth that this is what the system is doing. And don't lie to ourselves or fool ourselves that we're doing something or operating in a system and we're not entering that space compromised. Because we're perpetuating it on a day-to-day basis. That's how institutionalized racism works. It's plug and play. That's why it's persistent and pervasive. It's resilient because whether you support it or not, you're supporting it. That's how white supremacy works. You do it without even thinking about it. Like, wow, he said white supremacy. I did, and it's going to be okay. I did this in my workshop. Let's pause. It's okay. Breath. I'm not talking about white people. I'm talking about a system and a structure. I heard two speakers. I didn't believe it the first time I heard it. Then I heard it again at Haku, and I said, maybe it's true, but I admit I haven't researched it to explain, like white supremacy in this way, really simple way. And the speaker was Ed Trust West when I heard it first, and then Haku secondly. He said, have you ever, if you're a person of color, you've gone to the bathroom and you go to a sink that has the automated, water. And you there, and they said, it's not popping on. Then you see it pop on for somewhere else. You wait till they leave, then you go to that sink. I wish I made this up myself. I'm totally stealing right now. Said did this, and then it doesn't work for you. And said doesn't work. Said because the person who designed it didn't test it on people of color hands. Now, I don't know if that's true. But it works. The analogy absolutely works. I can use other analogies. Go to the Rite Aid and get a flesh-colored Band-Aid. What is that going to look like? Yeah, heads up, it's not going to be like me. It might look like this side of my hand, but I got to get a cut on this side of my hand. Right? It's just, it operates autonomously. It's just on its own, and whether you recognize it or not, you're supporting its effort. That's reality. But let's tell the truth. And through telling of the truth, or through that truth telling is what I believe will make the difference. And so it's probably no secret how I would answer that question. Simply, I believe reform does not work. In fact, I say it never has, or never will. And you live this. I mean, how many of you been in the system for more than 10 years? Like how many different damn initiatives? I was talking to Kathy Booth, Basic Skills Initiative. We went back to Partnership for Excellence. How many remember Partnership for Excellence? Right, just a whole lot of stuff we tried, and then how did that work out? I mean, I love Dr. Phil, the question. I love him. I don't watch him, but I know he says this, and I use it all the time. It's like, how does that work out for you? I think that's the coldest psychological question any therapist could use. It's like, okay, fine, I'm not going to argue with you. Just tell me, how has that worked out for you? So I ask us as a system, how has that worked out? Could go back and forth. I could argue. But the fundamental question, how has that worked out? Still pervasive and persistence gaps in achievement, right? We could talk about that a lot. And my simple thing is, damn, why? Can we start by talking about no, I'm serious. I'm stuck. This is 1 + 1 = 2 type stuff. This is ABC. If you had a plan that from the onset was structured in a way to maintain an area idea of elitism, to be able to weed out, or what we talked about earlier from the previous keynote, talked about cooling out process, designing that. Can we just begin to talk about creating a new plan? Like, we got a lot of smart folks just in here alone that could begin to talk about what would a fair and just system look like. I mean, one of the things that I think sometimes our job in the rat race robs us of, and I was talking to Dr. Hotep about, is a freedom, he was talking to me about it and I was listening, of imagining something different. And we begin to build identity and worth and comfort on the thing that we know, even when we know it's not good for us. But it is what it is that we know. Our lifestyles are supported by it. We went to school for it. We got the title to go with it. And, I help who I can help. So the fact that this is the truth, I'm going to stick with what it is that I know. And I'm sure when Clark Kerr developed a desperate system in 1960, I think he will be surprised of how sustainable a desperate plan was. I think he probably would have overestimated at some point the very people that he was locking out would at some point kind of rise up and figure out that they playing a game that fundamentally was not designed for them to ever win, and just say, I'm not happy with just 10 of us getting out. Like, if all of us can't get out, it's not good. I think he would have overestimated the fact that we would have had folks, even those people that the system was designed for, that would inherently see the unfairness baked into the process, would say, hey, I care enough about my neighbor. I care enough about the folks of color that I know, those in the classroom, that no way will we continue to plug into a system that would continue to uphold the type of structure and equities that exist. There's a term, y'all. There's a term. Not often used in education, I admit. But there's certain things that happen when there's a recognition that the system is not working for the people. Can we say the word collectively and maybe hold each other's hands as it comes out for moral support? And I think the good news is that we're on the brink of this, and this is why this message is so important and why I took the time to talk to you earlier, because I think we're on the brink of something significant. What we need is a community college, say it with me, revolution. A community college revolution. A complete overhaul of the system. And for that, with my last remaining few minutes, I want to just talk a little bit in terms of what that would look like, at least a mindset or approach that will inform the revolution. in equity and foreign equity work, and this is something we talk about at my institution, and a lot of this is the change paradigm. We call it the CRC change paradigm at my institution, is that quickly that we want to talk about equity but don't want to talk about what created the inequities in the first place. Like, how can you have equity conversations without talking about sexism, homophobia, institutionalized racism, and white supremacy? We want to talk about equity like it just popped up one day. Like, here I am, let's discuss it. That was pretty good. Like, I've been going to boot camp. That's how my knees was able to bend on that without getting hurt. Talked about fix the college, not the student. Right? It's a revolutionary mindset. Expose and challenge racist structures. Right? So when we do often talk about notions of institutionalized racism or structural inequalities, we don't concretize how that manifests within the institution, so those terms remain abstract. Right? So we don't talk about in terms of how your curriculum perpetuates, right, institutionalized racism, or assessment practices, or placement practices, right, or hiring, right? So we got to challenge, and I think we challenge the very core of the educational master plan and call for a revisit or redesign, or we just write one and submit it. And Dr. Darla Cooper has heard me say this, and I've been saying it more and more. We need to file a lawsuit, class action lawsuit against the state of California for the inequitable level of state investment it has for students of color. We attack the system. Exploit structural weakness. I don't have a whole lot of time to go on that within this structure that was created, there's still some vulnerabilities. And so there's opportunities to do good work. Right now, right, I believe 705 exposed a structural vulnerability, right? I think whether or not how you feel about the funding formula created a structural vulnerability because someone was willing to at least try to think about a way to do it than we've done before. And long as someone is willing to try to do something differently, I think that creates space for us to do something to challenge the structure, whether you agree with it or not, right? I don't have a whole lot of time to unpack that. Hopefully you got that. Interrogate all practices and policies within your institution. Interrogate. Nothing within your college or your system deserves your protection. When I started out my college, I said that nothing, with our outcomes looking like this, what is it you're trying to protect? Everything is challenged. And if it survives the interrogation, that means it's a solid practice. If it doesn't, it needs to go. We have barriers, right, conscious and unconscious, that we set up that we make it even more difficult on top of the system, things that we can change for our students to be able to interrogate all practices. What you teach, who's teaching it, why are you teaching that? Why is it in this classroom and not that classroom? Question of professional development. Leadership practices, everything within your institution needs to be interrogated. Kill the pilot. What does that mean? Someone like, kill the damn pilot? He like, Southwest is racist? That's another story. But I believe, and I demonstrate that we can do it, is if something is a good idea, a good practice, you could bring it at scale from the onset. As long as it's better than the thing you've done before, let's try it. Right? We pilot things to death. So kill it. Have a sustained sense of urgency. We have this paralysis by analysis. Give me this data point. Well, show me this by students who come at night, but come at night on Thursdays and not Wednesdays. And until we answer that question, we don't know what it is we're going to do, because students who come Thursday are very different student population than students that come Wednesday nights. And I'm like, hey, let's discuss it. We want to do something that's really good. Take your time. But I tell them this at my college, I don't know what you tell them on yours. Every minute we take is another set of students that's still navigating something we already acknowledge that is broken. Right? So it might take 2 semesters. If you tell them it takes 2 semesters to do that, to come up with our guided pathways work, okay, it might take 2 semesters, but let me tell you what's on your head. So do you think we could push a little bit faster? Or do you think we could try this out and just fix it as we go? Because I guarantee you, what we're going to do is not going to be worse. I think this is the last on the end here. It's to operate out of courage and not the fear of and you feeling the blank. To do this work, to be a revolutionary. I don't know, have y'all owned that yet? Can I call you that yet? Where are you on the revolutionary thing? Let me do a room check. Like, nah, they've got some, nah, here, halfway, here. But tell me, if you're really here, stand up and give me a fist. If you're really ready for this revolutionary thing. Operate off of courage and not fear. I know you're like, dang, where's my boss at before I stand up? But your boss might be standing up too, and that's the beautiful thing. And your boss might not be standing up, and that's the beautiful thing. Come work at CRC. We taking all revolutionaries. I just want to let you know off top. If you want to work at CRC, put in your cover letter. Put it as a work title, been a revolutionary from October 10th, 2019, and just dot. And that will be our secret revolutionary code. I'm end with this. You got this. In fact, it's not a new courage. You already exhibited the courage each and every day, as I told you. It's just a new mindset. It's a new way in which we're going to direct energy and effort. When I say you control your space or transform it, now you're going to revolutionize your space and bring the revolution to your institution. Because at the very least, I'm going to repeat what I said a few minutes ago. Our babies, our children, folks in our community simply deserve opportunity to go to an institution that have been planned and designed for them to be successful. Thank you.